A nation divided. Should the president have the authority to send National Guard troops into American cities? The debate is heating up, and the answers aren't as clear-cut as you might expect. Recently, President Trump's decision to deploy the National Guard to places like Washington, D.C., and his consideration of sending troops to cities, such as New Orleans, has ignited passionate discussion across the country. At its core, the issue touches not just on crime and public safety, but on Americans' fundamental freedoms, the boundaries of presidential power, and a deepening political divide. Strong support for Trump's deployments comes from his Republican base, many of whom believe that bringing in the National Guard will curb criminal activity and improve their sense of personal security, and this belief holds, even if they don't reside in affected cities themselves. These supporters also express a willingness to see similar deployments, regardless of whether a city is led by Democrats or Republicans, or even if it's their own community on the line. But here's where it gets controversial. A majority of Americans actually oppose these deployments. Those against sending in troops argue that such actions could threaten their civil rights and freedoms, and doubt the effectiveness of this strategy in lowering crime or making their neighborhoods any safer. Many of these critics suspect that the move is politically motivated, rather than being a sincere attempt at crime prevention. Interestingly, geography plays a secondary role to partisanship. City dwellers typically reject the idea of sending troops into other urban centers, while rural Americans are more likely to approve. However, the driving factor isn't so much where people live, but which side of the political spectrum they're on. Here's the part most people miss. Even among those who believe that deploying the National Guard could lower crime rates, there's a large fraction who still object, voicing concerns that the president's motives are based in politics rather than public safety. While Americans are split over the matter, most agree on one principle. Both the president and local leaders, such as mayors or governors, should have the authority to deploy National Guard troops, if needed. There's noticeably less support for the power belonging to local officials alone. And even among Trump supporters, few advocate for the president to have that power exclusively. How does all this factor into Trump's broader approval ratings? Well, as you might imagine, the policies people focus on shape their opinions of him. For Trump loyalists and most Republicans, issues like immigration and deportation, along with crime, take precedence over concerns about the economy or inflation. Recently, the focus on law enforcement and troop deployments appears to have shifted attention away from inflation, providing a modest boost to his overall standing. In fact, his approval rating among Republicans has once again risen above 90%, and his overall support has stabilized after months of decline. On the flip side, Americans who judge him primarily on economic management or inflation remain thoroughly dissatisfied with his performance. Now, let's talk about tariffs, another topic fraught with tension. Economic headwinds continue to challenge Trump, with many Americans feeling that his trade policies, especially imposing tariffs, have made their finances worse. Roughly 40% admit to cutting back on purchases due to higher prices resulting from these tariffs, and public support for these measures is dwindling, but most notably among those outside the Republican base. Yet, among Republicans and Trump's ardent followers, there's still strong backing for bearing these costs if it means supporting his trade policies, no matter their income level. When it comes to jobs, people are divided. More Americans expect the tariffs to create manufacturing jobs, and this optimism is highest among Republicans. As for Trump's much-publicized One Big Beautiful Bill Act, public opinion hasn't budged since its passing, and its approval remains underwater. Most Americans say they want the Federal Reserve to remain independent, free from presidential influence. And this is the part that might spark debate. Even within the Republican Party, there are differing opinions. Hardcore Trump supporters want the Fed more under his direction, while a significant number of Republicans prefer the central bank maintain its autonomy. Few would go as far as to support Trump replacing Fed officials who disagree with him. So what does this all mean for executive power? In general, Americans are more supportive of Trump's intended goals than his methods. 2/3 believe he's trying to expand presidential power, something the majority aren't comfortable with. Democrats see Trump's approach as a grab for federal control, while Republicans are more likely to describe his efforts as streamlining government and improving efficiency. And this is the part that could really spark disagreement. Should presidents have more authority? Especially when it comes to national security and crises. Or does this set a dangerous precedent for future leaders, no matter which party they represent? Where do you stand? Is deploying the National Guard about protecting people or playing politics? Should the balance of authority tip toward presidents, local officials, or remain divided? Share your thoughts and don't hesitate to push back against the popular narrative. After all, these debates aren't just about headlines. They're about the future direction of the country. Reporting based on a CBS News YouGov survey of 2,385 U.S. adults conducted September 3rd to 5th, 2025. Results are representative with a margin of error of 2.5 points.